treatment. And since I'm a heart patient and on Plavix and can't take injections, that they need to send me to physical therapy. I don't understand what that is going to do to lower the cost that Medicare is spending for treatment to people when they're increasing treatments that don't even really have anything to do with that specialist issue, when that should fall under my primary care or anything else if I needed it, or if it would even help me, it should be my doctor's choice. And also, how come that puts me in an extra hardship because my premiums are higher at specialists?
Yeah, Renee, thank you very much. And you've hit on a question that a lot of folks call up and ask, which is, how is this new program going to work? How is it going to save money? How is it going to affect me? And what you're seeing firsthand is that it's not going to fix anything. It's simply going to take choices away from you. And I tell you, we need to have one whole town hall meeting on just health care here in the near future, because what you're experiencing, a lot of different folks are experiencing. And it's actually, in my opinion, going to get worse. Because as the new health care law comes into effect next year, a lot of your doctors may choose just not to participate. They may not take Medicare anymore. You're already hearing doctors saying that they can't afford to take Medicare, and the Medicare reimbursements actually will go down under the new health care rule. And you're faced with the possibility that your doctor may no longer accept you. You're faced with the possibility, by the way, that your employer may no longer offer you health care. It's actually cheaper for them to pay a fine than it is to provide you with health care. So we need to have a long town hall meeting, I think maybe just on health care in the next couple of weeks. But it is real. It is out there, and it is. It's not nearly what y'all have been told about. Listen, there's going to be an independent payment advisory board. Some people call them death panels. I don't use that language because it's not technically accurate. But there is an unelected group of 15 people who will make a decision on what coverage you get, Renee. And if they make a decision that you don't, someone at your age group and your condition is not going to get that particular coverage, then that will be denied to you. I don't call them death panels because oftentimes those decisions are not life or death. But one of the largest cost-saving proposals in the new health care law is this independent payment advisory board that will unilaterally dictate what is covered and what is not covered by the government health care programs. And I think we've got some real challenging is facing us as a nation unless we repeal that law. We have tried to repeal it several times, by the way. We voted several times in the House to repeal it all at one time. We voted to repeal bits and pieces of it. We voted to defund part of it, and the Senate simply refuses to accept it. And I was in favor of shutting the government down last year in order to force a debate on that. I didn't have enough Republicans who agreed with me. And more Republicans decided to compromise with the Senate, and we did not repeal Obamacare. We did not defund Obamacare. We did not dismantle it, and I was disappointed with that. So, again, before we move on, the poll tonight regards the Health and Human Services issue on contraception. If you think it's a religious freedom issue, press 1. If you think it's a contraception issue, press 2. If you don't know, press 3. If you don't care, press 4. I'm hoping to get some more questions on that before we.
Your response has been registered.
From Rick in Rock Hill. Rick in Rock Hill, they say you have a question about mandated insurance.
Yes, Congressman Mulvaney. My biggest question is how is it that the government, the state, can mandate oral contraception or contraceptive practices as part of, quote, a sexual health package that they basically mandate all insurers to give and to present to their patients? I think that it should be personally up to each insurer as well as each corporate entity or religious entity or whatever entity is that supplies the insurance, up to them as to whether or not they can offer this, very elective types of coverage for their constituents. It boggles my mind. And my next question, the question is where does it stop? Does it stop at just contraceptives? Does it stop at other areas of sexual health and the like? It boggles my mind that people are screaming for the government to stay out of the bedroom, and yet they want to be a part of it. So,
well, you've hit the nail on the head, and I think it's important. Your first point was that how can the government force this particular program, and they're not forcing it on individuals. I don't think you meant to imply that, and didn't really imply that. We're forcing it on employers. We're forcing employers to offer it, and we're forcing it on insurance companies that they have to offer it. Thanks very much, because that really is the point of the question here tonight, Rick. And the justification that the government will give you, that Health and Human Services will give you is, and this will offend some people, so I try and be as politically correct as possible, which I don't usually do, but again, we've called a lot of people here tonight. We've got several thousand people on the phone. The administration's position on it is that it is cheaper than pregnancy, and that you'll save money in the long run by not needing future abortions. That is the Health and Human Services position. Catherine Sevillas came out and said that last week. That by preventing unwanted pregnancies, which is relatively cheap, we will avoid future abortions, which are relatively expensive, and thus it is a cost-saving measure. And that is the justification. That's the justification for a lot of this, is that, well, if we do this, it'll be cheaper, and since healthcare is too expensive and we all think it costs too much money, here's a good way to cut costs. It bothers me. It really does bother me at a political level, at a moral level, at a religious level, to treat pregnancy as a disease. I don't believe that. I am one of the folks who believes that life begins at conception. I know not everybody agrees with me on that, but I do happen to believe it. To think that the government could come in and force me to do this. Keep in mind, and we've talked tonight about the impact on religious organizations, and I hope we get a chance to talk about that before we hang up here in 10 or 15 minutes or so. But think about the impact on devout business women who own businesses. Say you're a devout evangelical Christian woman and you have a business and you hire 50 or more people. You're going to be covered by the new health care rules, and you are going to be obligated under the force of law and under the payment of a fine if you do not do it, to provide health care insurance that offers the morning after pill, for example, to your workers. You're going to have to pay for them to get free sterilization. You're going to have to pay for them to get free contraception. You have to pay for them to get free morning after pills. And that is just as offensive to some people's religious beliefs as individuals as it is to an organization such as the Catholic Church, the Methodist Church, or the Jewish faith. So we had a tremendous presentation in Congress by the head of the Missouri Synod Lutheran Church that spelled this out better than anybody I'd ever seen, saying, look, I'm not a Republican, I'm not a Democrat, but I believe what I believe, and I can't imagine a government that would actually force me to do this. In fact, at a certain point, one of the reasons the country exists is so that we could have exercised our religious freedoms without the government telling us what to do. So, Rick, the answer to your question is I don't know what gives them the justification in the real world. In their mind, what gives them the justification is that it is a cost-saving measure, and that since this is so expensive, they are willing, in my mind, to sacrifice our religious freedoms in order to reduce costs. So I disagree with it, but you ask a straight question. I'm trying to give the straightest answer I can to the question. Tiffany in Rock Hill has another question on individual rights, and contraception. So go ahead, Tiffany.
Yes. First, I want to thank you for this. I think it's wonderful that you call. And I must first say I am not a Republican, but I have really followed you and have grown to like some of your ideals. But my question is this. When we have this discussion about contraception and religious freedom, where does the individual right come in? I feel that, for a woman who has had to take birth control because of medical purposes, that I feel like my rights and my medical needs are not being even discussed in this whole debate. And maybe changing some of the language. I don't know what they need to do, but I don't feel that a woman should be denied this medical treatment that has been proven to help in certain female medical problems just because of the religious freedom.
Tiffany, what a great question. Thank you for that. And in fact, I asked the exact same question of my church. So I'm going to give you the answer from my church. And if folks don't know, I'm a practicing Roman Catholic. And I asked one of the bishops who came to Washington to testify. We had a Roman Catholic bishop, the head of the Missouri Synod, 2 Southern Baptists, and a Jewish rabbi. I tell people it sounds like the beginning of a bad joke. But we had them there. And I asked the bishop afterwards, I said, Bishop, I know women who have taken contraception for medical purposes. How do I answer them? They're not using it as birth control. They're using it because that particular drug has another effect on them that helps them treat medical conditions. So I will give you the answer from the Roman Catholic Church's perspective, as it was explained to me, which is that the Church has no objection to the use of the contraception in those circumstances. That the particular church believes that different drugs can be used different ways, and if you're using it for to say there are certain conditions that the contraception can relieve in women, it sounds like it's what you're describing, that it would be perfectly acceptable within, say, if you work for a Catholic university, to receive contraception for that purpose. If it's a medically documented purpose, that does not violate at least that particular church's religious views. So to your specific point, I don't think anybody's talking about that. What we're talking about is the use of it in a way that violates the religious beliefs. And please, and I know you didn't imply this, but just to the extent anybody thinks that any of this discussion is about denying women the right to contraception, nothing could be further from the truth. The question is simply whether or not you're going to make people who don't believe in contraception pay for it. If you make people who don't believe in sterilization pay for it, are you going to make people who don't believe in morning after pills to pay for it? So you raise an excellent question. It's a very narrow area, but as far as at least one major player in this national debate, which is the Roman Catholic Church, I think their answer to you would be that that is not the issue they're trying to get to, and that the use of contraception for other medical purposes other than preventing pregnancy would not violate the teachings of that particular church, nor would they object to it if that was part of their health care program. So I hope that helps. I have we're a few minutes left, and again, if you want to ask a question, you can press star 3 to press a question. We're getting down to the end, and I know folks have been on for a long time. If you don't get a chance to ask your question, please press star 0 and leave your email address, and we will contact you directly and answer your question directly. You can also call the office at any time in Washington, 202-225-5501. Rock Hill office is 803-327-1114, and the website is mulvaney.house.gov. So we have a question here. The next question is Gail in Rock Hill. Gail has a question about religious freedoms.
Yes, I do. Good evening. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for staying on the line tonight.
Thank you also for having this. I just feel that many of our religious rights are under assault from this administration. Not only the contraception issue, but the political correctness with having to say Happy Holiday instead of Merry Christmas. Schools in New York City, the buildings that pastors were using, the services on Sunday for the very poor have been thrown out. Pastors were arrested. Prayer is for Christian children to get together and have a silent prayer together in a group. That's not allowed anymore. I just feel like it's an assault against people with very strong beliefs that pregnancy is from the minute of conception, and I don't know what Republicans can do to turn this around.
Gail, thanks very much, and you raise a really good point. Is this part of a larger affront on religious freedoms? And I read the same emails. I've seen bits and pieces of that up here. I try not to get too far into accusing people of being pro-religion, anti-religion, being a good Christian, being a bad Christian. I found that in my job, at least, it's counterproductive to do that. I am concerned that, and let me see if I can answer your question this way. I was watching MSNBC. I do all the time. People think I watch Fox. I very rarely watch Fox. I want to know what the other side is saying. It values me very little to listen to people agree with me all day. I want to know what the other side is saying. And I've told this story already tonight about watching MSNBC one night, and they had a leading scholar from the other party talking about the First Amendment and how the First Amendment provided a freedom from religion. And that is not my interpretation of the First Amendment to the Constitution. It's not my interpretation because it's not what the language says. It says that Congress made a law infringing upon our rights to freedom of religion. That doesn't mean freedom from religion. We are free to practice our religion as we see fit in this country. It's one of the founding principles. It's the First Amendment to the Constitution. In fact, it's the first right listed in the First Amendment, even before the freedom of the press. It's the big one, as a matter of it is one of the fundamental principles of this country. And the concept of separation of church and state, while it has become our practice and our doctrine, is not part of the Constitution. It's probably, it has become nearly that, but it's not in there. What's in there is that you have freedom to practice your religion as you see fit. And I think there's a lot of people who think that maybe that in the long term is not healthy for the country, and I couldn't disagree with those folks more. There's a push, by the way. There would be a group within the other party that would believe that anything outside the four walls of the church is not protected, that you can do whatever you want to when you're in services on Sunday for that hour, but once you walk outside the door, your rights go away, and that's something we need to be very cognizant of and be ever vigilant against, because I think that undermines everything that we stand for, I think, as a country. So let me take one or two more questions now. Ginger has been on the phone for 40 minutes. Ginger, thank you so much. You waited the very longest, and I appreciate you doing that. You had a question about the deficit.
Yes, sir, and I thank you for taking my call. My concern is the deficit, and I don't know if a lot of people realize that when we borrow money from other countries, that we're selling America. It's not like we're just borrowing money and we pay it back. It's almost like they can call and say we want our money, and we'd have to give them part of America. So I just wondered if I wanted people to realize that when we borrow money for things that we don't have money for, then we're selling America.
Ginger, we talk about it every single day because the biggest perpetrator of that is the federal government. I mean, we're going to borrow another $1 trillion this year. 25 cents of every dollar of that comes from China. We pay the Chinese more in interest every single month, or we pay them enough in interest every single month for them to buy 3 of our very new highest performing fighters. We don't sell them to them, obviously, but that's how much money we're giving them. We're almost single-handedly financing their Defense Department, or at least we could through our interest payments to them. So we are aware of it. In fact, the outgoing chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff said he thought the greatest threat to our national security was our debt, not only because of the size of it and what it limits us in the ability to do, but and who we're borrowing it from. I mean, the example I give is we have an agreement with Taiwan, that if Taiwan is ever attacked, we will come to their defense. I'm not saying they will be at any time in the near future. There's no reason to think that, but this is an example. If Taiwan was attacked, it would most likely be by the Chinese. That's not an unusual statement to make. And if that were to happen, we would have to borrow money from the Chinese in order to defend the Taiwanese from China. And I think that's the type of things that you expose yourself to as a nation when you borrow too much money. When your family borrows too much money, you expose yourself to risk. When your country borrows too much money, you expose yourself to risk. We do it every single day up here in Washington. There's a small group of us just pleading with the government to stop spending money it doesn't have. The budget debate will go on again this weekend next. And all I can tell you is I'm doing everything I possibly can every single day to just let everybody know that we spend way too much money up here. I've got a question from Sammy in Rock Hill, who's also waited a good long time, almost half an hour. Sammy, thanks very much for staying on the line. I don't know if you're a he or a she, but you say you have a question about contraception and gas prices. There's an interesting combination, so fire away.
Well, my question was, thank you for calling, and but my concern is that as we get into this election cycle, that we're allowing the Democrat Party to dictate the conversation that's leading up to the election, which has now become the health care, the contraception issues. I'm not belittling that, but I think the focus should be more on the economy, because that's oil prices are skyrocketing, food prices are going up, and again, we're pretty much losing control of our destiny here.
I can't disagree with you, because you make an excellent point about the priorities and so forth and what we should be dealing with. And we will talk about gas prices. In fact, we've talked about it here on this call tonight, about the Keystone Pipeline and about what we're trying to do to make more oil and gas available in this country. We talk about deficits all the time, spending all the time, jobs all the time. I think the House passed almost 30 jobs bills, including one that I wrote last year, but they all die in the Senate. Keep in mind, once the president starts running on a narrative of an obstructionist Congress, then the fact that we don't get anything done helps him. So every time we said something to the Senate kills it, and then the president can go, look, it's an obstructionist Congress. We did actually pass some good jobs bills last year, some small ones. But once the president started saying he wants to run against an obstructionist Congress, it encourages the folks in the Senate to simply disagree with everything that the House wants to do. But to your larger point, why are we talking about? And again, I'm hoping tonight, and that we've got the impression that it's not about contraception, that it's about religious liberty. And I think at some point you have to ask yourself the question, even if gas prices were back at $1 a gallon, even if we have full employment, would you still want to live in a country where you don't have the ability to practice your religion? I wouldn't. To me, it's one of those fundamental principles that if we give up on our religious freedoms, we give up on being Americans, and we end up turning into a country that we never wanted to be. So I hear what you're saying, and I can't disagree with you, because when you're out of a job, man, that's the one thing that counts. And when you're paying, $75 to fill up your car once a week, that hurts. I do it. I mean, my wife drives a Ford F-250, and it's just killing me. But something goes so much deeper when you start talking about religious liberty, when you're talking about me as a businessman, back when I ran businesses, to make me do something that violates my religious principles or face a fine, and a significant fine. That speaks to me as an American on an entirely different kind of level, and it doesn't diminish what's happening with oil prices and with jobs. But I think if we ignore it, we do so at our peril. And that's why we're trying to keep a balance. And that's why I did this tonight. Again, let me summarize why I did this. A couple weeks ago, the Health and Human Services folks came out with this rule that said that, churches would be exempt from having to provide their employees with free contraception, sterilization, and morning after pills. Religious organizations were not. So Catholic universities, Methodist colleges, Jewish charities, evangelical schools would not be exempt. And that even if those underlying religious organizations just didn't believe on a religious ground in things like sterilization and morning after pills, the government was still going to force them to offer those services for free as part of their health care. And if they didn't do that, they were going to pay a significant fine. The uproar was large. You may have heard something about it on the press. Then the president came out and said he's going to agree to a compromise. And the reason I had this call tonight is that so many people called me over the last couple of weeks to say, look, what's the deal on this? What's the straight information? What's the truth? And the truth of the matter is the compromise the president talked about did not become part of the law. All that the Health and Human Services did was say, look, we'll consider what the president said, but we are still going to require these organizations to do this despite their religious objections. We will not exempt religious schools or hospitals or charities. We might, in the future, reserve the right to grant that exemption, but we're only going to do it in very limited circumstances. And this is very important. I hope you can stick with me here through this explanation. Number one, we're only going to do it if those organizations are really closely tied to those churches. They can't just be a Presbyterian college in name. They have to be tied directly to those underlying religious institutions. Number two, they have to hire primarily from within their faith. And number three, they have to serve primarily within their faith. Folks, I don't know what religion you practice. You may not practice any religion, and that's your choice, and that's the country we live in. And God bless you. I'll fight for your ability to not have a religion. But that's not the definition of religion where I'm from. At a Catholic hospital, they don't ask you if you're a Catholic when they hire you. They just ask you if you want to help people, and you're willing to, and you've got the skills to do that. And when you come through the door with a heart attack or a broken leg or having a baby, they certainly don't ask you if you're Catholic or not before they serve you. That's not why that particular faith got into the hospital business. It's not the reason that evangelicals do outreach to people. They don't just preach to themselves. We preach to everybody. Service is an important part of not only the Christian faith, but the Jewish faith, even the Muslim faith. And I can't tell you the number of Islamic groups that have called me and worried about this particular ruling because they fear it will infringe upon their liberties as well. So for the Health and Human Services to define a religion as somebody who hires mostly within their faith and serves only within their faith, I think is probably just as offensive as anything that we've heard in this entire debate. Look, listen, that's going to wrap it up tonight. By the way, for those of you who stayed on the whole time and didn't get a chance to ask your question, I apologize. There's been folks on here from the very beginning. Ms. Moody from Gaffney, I see you've been waiting 49 minutes. I don't know why we're in Afghanistan either. We can have another conversation on that another time. But you were the next person in line, and I apologize. You've been on almost the whole time. But press *0 and leave us your email. Please, you cannot get stuff from us via email unless you give us your email. It's against the law for me to send it to you in an unsolicited fashion, so please press *0 and leave us your email or your question or both. For those of you who participated in the call and the poll, the question, is this debate about health insurance and contraception really about religious freedom, contraception, don't know or don't care? 52% said religious freedom, 14% said contraception, 23% didn't know, and 11% don't care. I'm hoping that by the next time we do this, that don't know and don't care number is much smaller than that. So anyway, thanks to everybody again. In Lancaster, Monday night with a town hall meeting, Sumter, Tuesday night with a town hall meeting, the website, mulvaney.house.gov. Please call us anytime, and thanks very much for participating. You were one of over 15,000 people who participated in this tonight. I thank you all for doing this. I'll talk to you again soon. Thanks again for letting me do this. I love this job. Talk to you soon. Bye.